Welcome to the Cocktail Guru Podcast,
a show about food, drink, and entertainment,
with a tight focus on the good life,
and all things delicious, luxurious, and fun.
I'm Jonathan Pogash, bartender, author, TV personality, and founder of the Cocktail Guru.
And I'm Jeffrey Pogash, wine and spirits professional, author, insatiable collector of culinary ephemera, and so people tell me, an engaging raconteur.
And my dad. You're looking, I say this a lot, Dad, you're looking well, especially with a glass of wine in your hand.
Well, I feel great because this is the interview. Today's interview is the one that I've been waiting for, really, since the very beginning of life. Well, close to it, but since the very beginning of our podcast episodes, this is the one that I have truly been looking forward to.
You know, you are just hitting home runs with these guests, booking these superstars.
I know.
I don't know. I truthfully do not know how you do it.
Well, it's just, you've been in the business long enough. You get to meet everybody there is. And
I know.
Fortunately, Kevin and I are still very much kicking and still. I gave away something I should.
That's okay.
Anyway,
you've been drinking. I've been drinking. As our guest said in the pre-interview here, have you guys been drinking or something?
We have, and I've been drinking Lustau, Pedro Jimenez. Sherry,
so you have a massive sweet tooth.
Well, I do have a massive sweet tooth, but
I have the Oloroso. That's what I have.
This is a sweet episode and a sweet guest that we have today.
Oh boy!
I'm going with one of my all-time favorite drinks, rich, complex, absolutely delicious. I'm going to take a sip in honor of our guest. Cheers, everyone.
Take a sip, and let's do the intro.
Well, we've done 26 or so podcasts.
29.
29 in the can, so to speak. and I should say 26 odd episodes, because indeed they are odd, many of them.
Yep, they are.
But one is true. This one is truly momentous for a number of reasons. Our special guest is a very important figure in the field that we are going to discuss, a true leader and innovator, and one who is actually of historic importance. And the reason I got involved in this podcast, you may have a different reason, Jonathan, is because
let's hear this.
Well, it's to preserve
for the money. You got into the podcast for the money.
I wanted to preserve the history of cocktail spirits and the subject of wine as well, and preserve the most important figures within those fields, if we could accomplish that. And I think to some extent we are accomplishing that. And it's for that reason that this becomes a very important podcast, because the person we are going to interview is, as I said, an industry leader in the field of wine education and the restaurant industry as well. This will be a momentous podcast because it's our very first episode on this particular subject. And what is the subject? The subject is wine. Wine.
Okay,
Dad. Did I say? Dad, you heard me correctly. Wine.
Your mic is a bit hot. It's either that or you're really yelling.
Well, yes, I'm doing both. You're
so enthusiastic, and this is a very special guest, and he has. I have more to say, but I'm not going to say it. I wanted to say something. I wanted to say he's been called the most famous. He's been called the most famous and entertaining wine educator in the United States, and we can attest to that fact because he's the author of 35 editions of the Windows on the World Complete Wine Course, which you have right there. You're showing it right there, Dad.
This is the very first one.
And you two were youngsters back in the day, starting your careers, although he had a 7-year head start, which is what it says here in our notes. Having worked as a sommelier at Dupree Canal House in High Falls, New York, we're going to bring on our guest in just one moment. to show that cocktail or mocktail lover in your family that you really care this holiday season than with a Cocktail Guru certified 100% cotton hoodie or a fashionable snapback baseball cap. The new Cocktail Guru shop has all of your holiday gift needs right there in one spot. It's, shall we say, a one-stop shop for things like bar tools, wearables, full cocktail box kits, and more. We're even offering a special 10% off holiday season discount with the code HOLIDAY22. But this offer only lasts through January 31st. So head on over to shop.thecocktailguru.com to peruse our offerings. That's shop.thecocktailguru.com, 10% off with code HOLIDAY22. Cheers and happy holidays. And now we're back. Our guest today, Dad, is?
Yes, he is author of 35 different editions.
I said that.
Of 35 editions of the Windows on the World Complete Wine Course. It is none other than Mr. Kevin Zraly. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. We do go back, and thank you for thinking about keeping history. I was a history major in college, and you take history and then you take my passion for wine, you put them together, and education, by the way. Also, my degree was education, history education. So, boom, that works for me when I started studying wine. And also, if you could show that book again, the first copy, I was like, funny stories here, right? So, this is the first edition. That goes back to 1985.
Yes.
And you see the picture. You can actually see the Manhattan and Empire State Building. You can also see the waiter serving wine. He's serving some wine to a table. And I said to my HR people at Windows, we should find out who that waiter is. He's on the cover of the book. And send him a free copy. And, so they did their research, but we couldn't send it to him because he was at Rikers Island.
No.
We could. I don't know who he was, but I wanted to, get it to him. But it's been a fantastic time for me. And thank you for mentioning, Jonathan, the Depuis Canal House Tavern, because I was actually reading something today about Jacques Pepin. By the way, this whole thing, this beverage thing, this wine thing, this food thing, this restaurant thing, they all go together. And Jacques Pepin, back in 1970, that's how old I am. I was 19 years old. I was just finishing off the Woodstock Music Festival. and so in walks Craig Claiborne, the first restaurant critic for the New York Times, along with Jacques Pepin and another famous chef called Pierre Franet. And they give this restaurant in the middle of nowhere a 4-star rating. Never, by the way, before and never after a 4-star rating. So keep this in mind. I'm 19 years old because I want to bring the beverage, the bartending part in. Bartending part is very important. And a lot of bartenders go into wine or vice versa or whatever, however it works out. So I'm there and I don't know who these guys are. Okay. I'm 19. I'm a steak, potato, beer, Irish guy. And so anyhow, one thing I did notice is that we went from 10 reservations to 110 reservations the following weekend.
Wow.
We had been all making our own drinks because we couldn't afford a bartender. I was 19 years old. Only one other person was older than me, and he was 20 years old. We were running a 4-star restaurant by the New York Times. Anyhow, so we didn't have a bartender, and I knew how to make something called a Singapore sling. You guys know how to do that?
Yeah.
Singapore sling, a little easy. I learned it, from drinking.
Not too many ingredients in a Singapore sling.
Yeah, I know. But the owner, who by the way was 26 years old, and in my opinion, talking about restaurants, without question, the first farm-to-table chef in the United States of America. His name was John Novi. So I was exposed to all of that kind of stuff. I became the bartender, and I was the bartender there for 6 years. Wow. And I sometimes think of myself as a better bartender than a wine guy. By the way, that restaurant now is called the Delaware and Hudson Canal Museum because it was right on the canal. Any canal buffs, you got to go see it. They were renovating the whole place. I bought the bar. I own the bar.
Oh, wow.
The physical bar.
Physical bar. I took it out of there because they were turning it into a museum. So talking about being part of the bar, also my uncle, I grew up in Westchester County in Pleasantville, New York. My uncle owned bars. And that's the day I was 18. On my 18th birthday, I was behind the bar. That's how I knew how to make a Singapore sling.
Wow.
There's what goes around comes around. So I know your show is based on liquor and bartending and stuff like that. And so I appreciate the fact that I'm the first wine guy. But before I was a wine guy, I was a bartender.
But that is something even I didn't realize. So I'm learning something right away, right off the bat.
My hair is much longer than it is. And also, did you notice,
Yes.
Jeff, you haven't seen me in a while, I just started coloring this gray recently.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah. I want to look older.
I've seen photographs of you, Kevin. I've seen you in that state, and it's very, very becoming.
Maybe you should think about that, Dad. Maybe you should color your hair gray. Just go all gray.
Well, it'll happen soon enough. I'm just going to leave well enough alone for the moment. But from Dupuis Canal House.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second, Dad. We forgot to ask the question, which is.
Of course, especially of a former bartender. We
ask all of our guests when they come on our podcast, what is your desert island drink?
As a drink,
could be any type of drink. Yeah.
It could also be non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
No, I'm never going in that direction.
Okay.
I'm a proponent of alcohol. And all four of my kids graduated college because of it. So I'm very happy to say that. And by the way, my last one just graduated last May, not this May, last May. So now, and anybody out there that has children knows this, now I have no money going out. It's all staying in, which is a big new experience for me. Great for the pandemic.
Well, congratulations.
I don't care how hot it is, because the island could actually be cold, right? Wind. So I'm thinking about that. Because I'm going with a red wine. I'm going with a Bordeaux. By the way, this is a Bordeaux that I'm having here. And it will be Chateau Latour.
Wow.
Right? And,
of course.
I have to, again, this is, you guys do this. Jeffrey, you know what I'm talking about. I've had every vintage of Chateau Latour since 1900. And actually others going back into the 1800s. So I might as well die with it, right?
Absolutely. Oh,
my
gosh.
I don't know if I was going to die.
Yeah.
It'll be in your sarcophagus. It'll be in your coffin. It'll be in in your tomb. Yeah.
All the empty bottles or the memory bottles are downstairs in my cellar.
I certainly would be drinking that wine until the moment of my demise as well, if I were lucky enough to own them.
What if there was only one bottle and you and me are on the island? What's going to happen then, Jeff? Huh?
Then we're going to sit down, smoke a peace pipe, and share the bottle. And enjoy it and reminisce about old times.
Yeah, they were actually, and for the young people that are listening, the change. What's the word? I actually wrote about it in the new edition. I called it the wine and food revolution. Windows on the wine and food revolution, which for me started in 1970. And I again, bartending was much more in fashion than it was wine. Nobody was drinking wine. My friends who thought I was a little nuts, to be honest with you. This is also, I don't want to forget this. This is my 50th anniversary of hitchhiking to California. Wow. I hitchhiked to California from Hudson Valley, where I live now in New Paltz, all the way to Santa Cruz. That's a fun story, but not for this podcast. But and visited the wineries of California. The wineries of California. Let me give you an idea. There were 24 in Napa. Okay, 24 wineries in Napa. There's over 450 today, and still growing somehow. Not a lot of land left. So, why are you hitchhiking to California? Why are you going to see people like, who's this Robert Mondavi guy you're going to go see? What's Inglenook? Let's just have a beer and get it over with. They really did think I was a little nutsy.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course they did.
So, anyhow, I had it. It was not going away. And so 50 years ago, hitchhiking back wasn't as much fun. I want to begin. When we have time to tell that story, we will. But
that would be nice. That would be nice to hear that story, yeah.
I made it back, and here I am.
I just want to say one more thing, and then we're going to get into a most important subject, possibly the most important. In 1973, while you were still at the Dupuis Canal House, I guess, I was in Paris, and I happened to have the opportunity to meet a guy named Stephen Spurrier while I was there. And he was offering wine classes to students at the Sorbonne, where I was studying at the time. And he had just started planning his wine school called l'Académie du Vin. and I became his first student before the Académie du Vin was actually a physical location. And that's when I fell in love with wine. And it was in 1973 that I first began my journey on the subject of wine, although I had, before that, while I was in college, tasted one or two. But mostly, like you, mostly beer. That's what I was really concerned with at the time during my college education. It was beer. It was Old Milwaukee and Pabst. That's what.
Or Rheingold, or what's the other, Schaefer. Sorry.
Those are local. Those were local New York beers. Yeah. Mine were. I went to college in Wisconsin, so I was drinking all the Wisconsin.
Old Milwaukee. Beers. We used to call in college. We used to call Old Milwaukee Beast.
Yeah.
Milwaukee Beast. But Kevin, in 1976, you were hired by Joe Baum as the sommelier at the newly opened Windows on the World, which was on the 107th floor of One World Trade Center. Can you, for those people who might not know, can you describe to us sort of the influence that Windows on the World had on the industry and what it meant to be working there?
Well, I want to a little quick journey. How do I get from a little town of 400 people, the Dupuy Canal House Tavern, to Windows on the World? And I did my hitchhiking to California, but right as soon as I finished college, I then got like Jeffrey, went to Europe, and I spent another 9 months there studying wine. And then, again, my friends, I got back. This is 1975, 76. Nuts again. You're still nuts, Kevin. Nobody cares about wine. Anyhow, I said, I love you guys, but I have to leave your little town of High Falls. And I then got a job. And I don't think you know this, Jeffrey, but I got a job with a little company called Charmer, or now it's called Empire. Yeah. And everybody knows this. Bartenders know all the liquor and all that kind of stuff. And it actually was a new company that this is all new, 1975. It was called Wines of All Nations.
Yes, I remember it well.
It didn't have any liquor and please don't get me wrong. I made my living mixing drinks, but I just wanted to be wine focused. Anyhow, Herb Choutet, and I do this because Jeffrey remembers Herb Choutet. He was the general manager who hired me, and he gave me 450 accounts. And it was in Rockland, it was in Westchester, it was in New York City. And I looked at the list of wines, which were great. I'm going to be a millionaire by the end of the year. Little I realized that everybody else was selling the same product at the same price. And I went around, and not only did I go around to these places, I'm looking at the address. Not only is there's no building, okay, where the address was. That's the kind of places I got. And I finally went back to Herb and I said, Herb, where did you get these 450 accounts? He said, well, Kevin, we have 45 salesmen, and each gave up 10 accounts for you.
Wow.
Yeah, right. So basically, I was selling nothing, okay? And it was also, and somebody gave me from a company called Shefflin. I bring this up only Shefflin, Somerset. Vince Barkos was his name. And he actually gave me a little piece of paper and said, go see Barbara Kafka at the World Trade Center. They're opening up a new restaurant. Try to sell them. And so I went down, 18th floor, by the way, of One World Trade Center, because Windows on the World hadn't opened yet. And I go to the receptionist. I'm here to see Barbara Kafka. And she said, who are you? And I said, I'm Kevin Zraly from Wines of All Nations. And she walks back to Barbara Kafka's office, and Barbara can't see you today. I'm sorry. Well, I said, I'll come back tomorrow, no problem. And I did go back the next day and the next day and the next day for 2.5 weeks. Now, as I'm sitting there, all these people are coming in, like David Rockefeller's walking in to see this guy, Joe Baum, and Abe Beam was the mayor back. Why are all these people? And then they're walking out with hard hats. Joe was showing them the place before it opened. Anyhow, finally, Barbara Kafka comes out, 2.5. By the way, Barbara Kafka was James Beard's editor. And Test Kitchen was in her brownstone on the east side. So that's who people don't know Barbara Kafka. As a matter of fact, when I went to her memorial 3 years ago, her cousin said, we come from a long line of difficult women.
Oh, yes, that's for sure.
Anyhow, I got to get to the story because you got other things to do. So finally she comes out and she says, you've been coming here for 2.5 weeks. What do you want? Who are you? And what do you want? And I said, I'm Kevin Zraly, Wines of All Nations, and I want to help you with your wine list. Last thing you should say to Barbara Kafka, you giving her any help. She knew everything. She spoke perfect French, she said. and new wine. She was going to do all of that. She was buying all the silverware, the dishes, working on the menus, etc. And she said, and this is an 18th floor, and it was very chaotic and busy, but she sort of screamed this: "Who the fuck are you?" And you know what? That thing that we're talking about, like the Canal House and managing a 4-star restaurant and teaching wine classes, it's Malcolm Gladwell. 10,000 hours. You got to have 10,000 hours. The Beatles needed 10,000 hours to go on the Ed Sullivan Show back in 1964 and look as good as they did. I had the 10,000 hours. I was there to sell wine, not for a job. And they happened to be looking for a young American. They didn't want anything, didn't want anything in the French way of doing things. They wanted a whole new thing. Anyhow, a week later, I was introduced to Alan Lewis, who was the manager, Joe Baum, boom. Next thing I know, they didn't use the term sommelier, by the way, cellar master. I was the cellar master of windows.
That's right. That's how it was listed. Cellar, yeah. Kevin Zraly, cellar master.
Did not want the French connotation of sommelier. Jonathan, your question, now I'm going to get to it. What was the impact? Windows on the World, Joe, here's what Joe Baum said to me. Kevin, I'm 25 years old. I want you to create the biggest and the best wine list that New York has ever seen. And best part, he said, don't worry about how much it costs.
Wow.
Just for the people in the local area, it was owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Not going there. Not going any further than that. And so anyhow, that's what I did. And I had the money to do it. And back in those days, it was French wines, only French. As a matter of fact, I have a wine list from the Dupuy Canal House Tavern back from 1971 that I wrote, that's on slate, and it's painted with whiteout. So 50 years later, it still exists on slate. It's this big, and I have the white on one side and the red on the other side. It's all French. Maybe some German wines, some German Rieslings.
Sure.
So anyhow, what an easy thing to do. And speaking of Alexis Lachine the other day, people don't know who Alexis Lachine is. I don't know. I understand that, but he was my mentor, one of my strongest mentors, and owner of Chateau Purée Lachine, a writer, Wines of France, the encyclopedia of French of wine, way before anybody else was doing it. And I called up Alexis Lachine and I said, I had met him in Bordeaux and when I was studying there, and I said, I got to buy some wine. Can you help me? Sure, come on over. So I go to Bordeaux, and I have all the money. And by the way, it was a fiscal crisis in New York City, terrible crisis in New York City. The city was going under, and I had all this money. And I went to Chateau Margaux, and I'd say, okay, I'll take 5 cases of the 1900 Chateau Margaux, and then we'll off to Lafite. We'll up to 29. I like the 29. Let's take 5 cases.
Oh my gosh!
It was a little, like kid in a candy store.
So it was literally unlimited. You had carte blanche. They said they had no budget, and they just trusted you to get whatever you thought would be applicable.
That is correct. And they didn't have time to monitor what I was doing because they were opening this restaurant that was an acre in size, which ended up, by the way, in September of 2001. I have no problem speaking about that. We were the #1 dollar volume restaurant in the world, $38 million just for one single restaurant. And we sold more wine than any restaurant in the world. And I stayed there for 25 years. I was there from the beginning until September 11th.
Yeah.
So it's...
interesting fact, I believe, once September 11th happened, then was that when Tavern on the Green became the #1 volume restaurant, which was the sister restaurant to the Russian Tea Room, which is where I started. I started at the Russian Tea Room 4 months before September 11th.
So that's, I have to say, that's probably maybe where I might have met you, because I follow this restaurant thing, because we also own the Rainbow Room.
Yes.
So at one time, Windows in the World was the #1 dollar volume restaurant. #2 was Rainbow Room, or vice versa, depending upon the year. #3 was Tavern on the Green. And people should, who's Tavern on the Green? What's Maxwell's Plum? Who's Warner Leroy?
Right.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Warner Brothers.
Exactly.
Like, the Yellow Brick Road, if you don't know what I'm talking about. This is fascinating stuff. Yes, the Russian Tea Room, which his daughter took over. I don't know if she was probably there when you were there.
Yes.
I do have to tell a story about that, though, but I don't want to tangent too much. They were the 3 great volume restaurants in the United States were all three of them were in New York City. I got to tell the quick story because the house champagne at Windows on the World was Veuve Clicquot. And I had always, on an anniversary, we were getting ready to celebrate the 25th anniversary of Windows on the World in October of 2001.
Wow.
And I ordered 500 cases of Veuve Clicquot that had it. I was down the cellar. I don't have time to get it down. And it had on there, Windows on the World, on the back, 1976 to 2001.
Wow.
When you look at it again, gets you a little bit.
Yeah.
But, they were very kind to me. Steve Lewin, I don't know if you remember Steve Lewin of Veuve Clicquot.
Of course.
You waited months. And finally in November, he says, Kevin, I got 500 cases of champagne that I can't sell because it has Windows on the World name on it. What are we going to do? And a lot of people don't know this, but we were a private club at lunch. We had 2,500 club members. And the guy who was running the club, Jules Rennell, said, you know what? Let's have a we don't even know who died. You know what I'm saying? On September 11th. So around November, even maybe December of 2001, we went to the Russian Tea Room where you were at. Mm-hmm. And we had a party for the club members.
And yes.
They could buy the wine, the champagne, the Veuve Clicquot, and they could only have 5 cases of it. They got it at cost. That was gone. 500 cases was gone that night. They couldn't sell it. Certain things that they, obviously it was for them, for their use only. And Veuve Clicquot also gave back $5 on every bottle to Windows of Hope, which took care of, which raised $25 million for the children who lost a relative, a parent, and took care of their education and health care until they were 21.
That's amazing. I think I remember. I think I kind of remember. I was definitely working. Did you? Do you remember which floor was it?
We had the whole floor. We had the whole restaurant.
All floors. That's amazing.
At least 1,000 people there.
And I do remember actually the Russian Tea Room taking in some displaced staff members because I believe we were all members of the same union, the Hotel Employee, Restaurant Employee International Union, right?
Yeah. Actually, one of the managers, and I can't think of his name right now, was a manager at Windows on the World. He had left before September 11th, and so he was the manager of the Russian Tea Room.
Oh, was it Bismarck?
Yeah, Bismarck was one of them. That's for sure. Yeah. But there were a few people before September 11th. So.
Yes. Oh, then there was a gentleman. He was the wine director at Russian Tea Room. I believe his name was Matthew?
Yes, I remember Matthew.
And he then started working for Charmer after working at the Russian Tea Room. But in any case, that was Kevin. Where were you on? Here we go. Where were you on September 11th?
Well, I do have 4 children, and I'm very happy with my 4 children. I love my 4 children. I'm a very lucky guy. And so I live in New Paltz, New York. I moved out of New York City when I had around 1990 or something, because I love New York City, but I needed to be in the country. I grew up in Westchester. At that time was country, believe it or not anymore. The place where I live back in when I was a kid is now across the street, which is Fields, is now 500 homes. But anyhow, I wanted to have that for my kids. So I moved upstate. And so my oldest son, Anthony, who, by the way, is in the wine business. He works for T. Edwards now. He worked for Frederick Wileman for 5 or 6 years. Anyhow, his birthday, September 12th. So there was a couple of reasons not to go. We actually were opening, as I just mentioned, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Windows on the World in October with the opening of the new wine cellar. And so the restaurant was actually closed because of the construction going on. So why go down? Right. It was the first day of school in New York City. There was also elections going on. So and so I stayed upstate because my son's birthday was his 10th birthday was September 12th. So
wow, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. The House of Lustau's Cellar standout returns to the U.S. to encourage our friends from the beverage community, stronger and renewed, to join them again. You can submit your recipe from now until December 11th. Enter the Cellar Hall of Fame and win a grand cash prize and a full week internship at Lustau in Jerez, Spain. And we're back.
And since we're on the subject of Windows on the World, I did want to show you this.
Oh, yeah.
Before I forget.
Dad is showing a menu of Windows on the World.
That, by the way, is Milton Glaser.
Yes.
That's his design.
His design, right.
His design,
right.
And if you don't know who Milton Glaser is, you got to check him out.
Look it up.
Yeah, Glaser, G-L-A-Z.
Well, I used to listen to him on the radio.
Yeah. Well, he was I have his book here. He unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but he also lived in Woodstock, which is right near New Paltz. So I would see him dining out and stuff like that. But he actually was the first designer of our menus, the wine list, all of the plates. And he also came back. A lot of people don't know this, but don't remember this, but there was a bombing in 1993 at the World Trade Center.
Which yes.
There. I unfortunately was not there that day. My mother keeps saying God has different plans for you. I don't know exactly what my mother means, but and I wasn't there that day. But so the restaurant, the World Trade Center reopened, but not Windows in the World. And I'll tell you why. Because the bomb that was in the World Trade Center, and by the way, that could have been a disaster if it had been a 10 feet difference of where the bomb took place. I'm not going to go into that right now, but the only elevator shaft that went straight up, which was 60 seconds to get to the top of One World Trade Center, was the Windows on the World elevator. There were two of them, straight up. There was no stopping. It also became the chimney for everything coming up from that bombing at the World Trade Center. We were closed for 3 years, from 93 to 96.
Oh, wow. And
we reopened again with Joe Baum as the leader, Michael Whiteman, and all these people who started Windows in the World at the beginning, and Milton Glaser came back and redesigned all the menus and the plates and stuff like that. So well, the whole thing, I should share this with you guys, because I besides wine is, let me put it, theater, arts, and music are number one. If you want me to get my guitar, I can bring it over here right now. Theater, arts, and music. Number two is sports. I've been a basketball coach for 40 years. Number three is wine, which pays for 1 and 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I have been working on for a long time, like many people, and I'm a dreamer, as some people would say, of a show, a Broadway show, off-Broadway show, whatever it is, a musical on Joe Baum.
Sure.
Not only, well, he would say the restaurant is show business. It's show business. You're not opening the door. You're opening the curtain.
Yes.
I can
stage. To the stage, yeah.
Never heard of Joe Baum, please look him up as well. He also created the Four Seasons restaurant in 1959. Which stayed there for a good 50 years. It's still there. The building is still there. I mean, the restaurant is not called the Four Seasons. So, and he also created 300 other restaurants, 400 other restaurants, including Windows on the World, and redoing Rainbow Room. So why do I bring that up? Because Milton Glaser, it was about design, how you design things. They were not called uniforms. They were actually all of that stuff was done by people from Broadway. Making their outfits, the lighting, how the lighting was, how the music was. And the food, Windows on the World, we were one of the first to ever have sushi and sashimi, bringing food from all over Windows on the World, wines from all over the world, food from all over the world. Plus you got a great view. And we owned the 107th floor, which we began Windows on the World, plus the 106th floor, 2 acres. 2 acres. And I must say this because we're all from here, local, New York kind of people. Not that it matters, but for me it does, because we lost 72 people on that day. And so I always have to make sure that I remember them. And of course, we just had the 21st year since September 11th. So anyhow, and I actually keep in touch with the people that like Michael Lamonaco, for example, who was the chef.
Sure.
Right.
And Glenn Vogt, who was the general manager, who was actually there that day, walked into the mezzanine and had, of course, got escorted out right now. He owns River Market in Tarrytown. There's a lot of different people. Emile, Jenny Emile, that's where the Emile family put Rainbow Room, the finances for Rainbow Room, and finances for Windows on the World. Anyhow, I'm going on and on and on because that's what I do.
Yeah.
On and on and on. So,
well, that's
It's incredible.
That's incredible, but that's great. That's very interesting about the idea for a musical or some kind of a Broadway, because obviously Del DeGroff would be in it because he's an amazing performer.
Dale, I hope that people know this.
And a protege of Joe Baum.
Right.
Yeah. Well, actually, believe it or not, he was in public relations. I don't know if you know the whole story.
Yeah.
Yes, we interviewed him on season 1
in 1976.
Yeah.
That did all that, and he said, "Wow, this is fun. Maybe I'll become a bartender."
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, we all know where he is today. But he did all the drinks for Rainbow Room. He did all the menus in the beginning, and also, well, he wasn't at the beginning of Windows in the World because he was still working for a public relations agency. And then, but he did come back, especially when we reopened Windows in the World in 1996. But that's flair. A lot of people. There are so many people that worked at Windows in the World that went on to, it was a training ground for some of the top people in all different aspects of wine and restaurants. It was a great place to be. I'm happy to say that I was there for 25 years.
Now, what I wanted to say was that Joe Baum, I'm paraphrasing, said people do not go out to dinner to dine, to eat. They go for the show, for the experience. And I'm paraphrasing there, but it's absolutely true. And he knew that, and he was a master at creating experiences, not just restaurants, but entire physical experiences for the diner. And by the way, I collect menus. You may or may not know that. So one of my goals has been for years to collect all the menus from Joe Baum's restaurants. So I have quite a few, and I started out with this one.
Yeah, that was his first restaurant.
That was his first restaurant. Yeah, so I have.
What was that? What was that one?
That was the Newarker at Newark Airport.
Which was not. It was not like Newark today. It was in the middle of nowhere in the swamp.
Well, I used to go there. I used to go to college in Wisconsin, so I had to fly out of the old Newark Airport. So I remember it well. And my father used to take me to Newark to watch the planes. And I remember going in one day to the Newarker, and he showed me around that restaurant because he was involved. My father was involved with Restaurant Associates.
So, well, I didn't know that. And Restaurant Associates, one of the great, people don't know Restaurant Associates, but they're behind the scenes. They own a restaurant in every block in New York City, and some, like the Reese brothers do, or operate them. So,
like Mama Leone's.
I went to Mama Leone's as a teenager. Yeah,
the brasserie. I mean, just so many.
Wow. So Restaurant Associates, they're the owner operators of these locations.
Well, they were. Yeah, they don't necessarily own all of them now, but they did. Yeah.
Joe Baum was the president of Restaurant Associates, actually, then went directly to Windows on the World. By the way, he went to the World Trade Center, not Windows on the World. The deal was that the Port Authority. The Port Authority was the partner in Windows on the World. As a matter of fact, 85% of the profits of Windows on the World went to the Port Authority, 15% to Hilton International.
Wow.
There's another story there, except that there were losses, which there were later on. The Port Authority never got involved in losses. A very smart contract. But Joe Baum actually started at the World Trade Center in 1970. It took him 6 years. So every operation, like coffee or hamburgers or anything like that, was ours. As a matter of fact, Jacques Pepin, it was instrumental in that restaurant in the Canal House, was a consultant because we were in a commissary. We were operating anything you ate or drank at the World Trade Center. It was a $50 million company. So it wasn't.
I had no idea the Port Authority was taking that much.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible. Yeah,
and there's actually a good book out, and it's called "The Most Spectacular Restaurant in the World." It's actually written about Windows in the World, and I was trying to write a book like that, and I couldn't do it. Tom Roston is the writer, New Yorker, Brooklyn guy, and he captured the whole thing. Great writer, and trying to put all the pieces together of how things happen, and design, everything that makes a restaurant successable is a good way to look at Windows in the World. How do you survive for that long, and also be on top of the game? And it's a restaurant on top of a tall building. Well, no, Joe Baum wasn't going to allow that to happen. And we had a restaurant inside of Windows in the World called the Cellar in the Sky.
Cellar in the Sky, sure.
for the ego of the chef. Who wants to cook for 1,000 people every night? What's the joy there? But the Cellar in the Sky, you had to pass the Cellar in the Sky to go to the restaurant, and it was glass.
Yes.
And it was all lined up with wine. And it only held 32 people, one sitting every night at 7:30 with classical music in the background. And it was advertised this way in the New York Times. The menu changed every 2 weeks, and it would say, for the next 2 weeks, we're serving the following wines. Well, 5 wines. Plus 7-course dinner. We didn't tell them the dinner, but we told them the wines. Which reminds me, if you want to I have every menu wine list.
Really?
All the wine I did for the Cellar in the Sky for at least 10 years, for every 2 weeks. I'm like you, I keep things, maybe too long. But I have lots of things when you come up to visit. And you should come soon, because you know what I said?
And we will.
2.5 years before the pandemic, I decided to drink my old bottles of wine, all my old bottles of wine.
Right.
Don't know why, but I said, this is the time. By the way, Robin Kelly O'Connor was here this weekend, so the wines, the empty bottles are all over the place.
I had lunch with him 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay, so he was getting ready to come up here to raid my cellar.
Yeah.
So I still have. I've done 1,000 bottles since the pandemic, which reminds me also that this pandemic. I did lose a few friends actually, unfortunately, because of COVID. But my life, I stayed home. I've been living. You're in my living room right now. But I actually do Zoom classes now.
Mm-hmm. I know. Windows on the World wine course is now a Zoom course, right?
Yeah, I went from Cellar Master to Zoom Master.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what Zoom was. Matter of fact, you can see I had difficulty even getting onto your show. All I have to do is press a couple of buttons. Anyhow, it's been going on now since, actually exactly 2 years. We started in October of 2000. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, we've had 5,000 students. It can happen from all over the world. And so I just started the classes 2 weeks ago. I'm starting the third year. And my partner is wine.com in this. And I couldn't have a better partner, because it's the largest retailer in the United States.
Yes.
And they deliver.
Right.
So I choose the wines, and it's all direct to consumer. And I sit here on Monday nights in this. This is my format right here, and my lighting has my lighting look.
It looks beautiful.
You look great, Kevin.
Thanks. Anyhow, I'm a very lucky guy about that, and so I'm continuing the classes. Classes going. And they started, by the way, when we were in 1976 for club members. And then we actually had like 12 people in the first class. And then, the club members said, I'd like to bring a guest. All of a sudden, we're at 24. And then there's more guests. And all of a sudden, we're a public wine school, which we started. The windows in our wine school started open to the public in 1980. And so I've had 25,000 students since those days.
And I think it was that year that you invited me to speak at one of those classes on the subject of Alsace wine, which is the area I was representing at the time.
You were, and you told me never to say Alsatian. I'll never forget.
I did.
I did. Alsatian wine, Kevin. It's a white wine from Alsace. You got that into me. Well, that's the way it worked. I still felt a little uncomfortable teaching, even though I started teaching when I was 20 years old. My first class was at a community college up here. I also taught a credited, this is another story for another time. How did I get the State University of New York to teach a credited wine course? Wow. 2 credits. When I was a junior, it was only open to seniors. And I'll say why, but my mother, my 92-year-old mom, and my father as well, but they said, Kevin, and this is when I'd give college, graduation speeches or something like that. You have to ask the question. If you don't ask the question, you'll never know the answer. You have to be brazen. But since you're from our family, you have to be politely brazen, which is also a word called chutzpah. Okay? That's the same thing. I get it. Like Barbara Kafka, dealing with Barbara Kafka. Okay, I can deal with you. And I'm going to come back until you see me. Politely. So just words of wisdom. Maybe I'll write a book on that.
You should.
As an aside, I too had experiences with Barbara Kafka. I was on a radio show with her once, and I must say it was a humiliating experience. That's all I'm going to say.
What happened? No. You have to say.
I'm not going to get involved in it, but it was there was some banter back and forth. I was young. I was very inexperienced. It was a major New York City radio outlet, and I just wasn't up. I wasn't up to par, and she could see that I wasn't up to par, and she took advantage of that. So it was not one of my best broadcast experiences.
We're gonna have our producers try to find that clip.
No, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not.
By the way,
going
back to the wine school. By the way, I'm indebted to Barbara Kafka, but and it took her, like, I would say, 20 minutes to understand why I was there, and why I was there. I have no idea. Why did God send me to Windows on the World? And I'm getting back to my mom again, and why am I in New Paltz, New York? You start questioning how did all this happen? How did I spend my whole life in wine? And there was a book called Wines of America by a guy named Leon Adams. And it was this thick. This was back in 1970 or something, or late 60s. And California didn't really exist, but it was that thick. And I read the book, and I'm going to page 20. All right. Ready for this? I'm studying wines now. It says, grape growing and winemaking began in the United States in New Paltz, New York in 1677 by the French Huguenots.
Wow.
God is calling me. God is calling me to. I'm in college here. Okay, you're telling me it all began here?
Whoa!
Right.
I didn't know that.
Amazing.
Neither did I until I read it. I don't think it's true, but it really, at that time, it made. Oh, this is unbelievable.
It's a nice story.
Yeah.
Now that's a great historic reference. It's
may not be true. It may not be true though.
No, it probably isn't. But I didn't. I was 19 years old. What did I care? This guy's telling me, and of course. They did do it here, but I've never been able to find out where. I've been working with a lot of historians, so you never know where life's going to lead you. So,
did you say that you play the guitar?
Yes, actually, I just found out I'm going through all my archives, and my first band in high school was called the Dead Ends, and we were playing at somebody's 16th birthday party. It was in the newspaper, and then we became the Motivations, and we played. We played soul rock. And, I remember being in the Battle of the Bands. And back in those days, young people, Battle of the Bands was one of the greatest things in the world. So this one band got up, and they had the uniforms, they had the Fender amps, they had they looked fantastic. They played Sunshine of Your Love perfectly. Right? And we're up, we're the ragamuffins in the corner with nothing, little amps, our jeans on. But we had a singer. We had a singer, Pete Vita, and we go out there, and this is in front of 1,000 people in a high school auditorium. And he goes, we go out, first song, oh
yeah.
The lion sleeps tonight.
And the crowd goes wild. Goes wild. And then we followed up with La Bamba. La Bamba.
Wow.
We won the Battle of the Bands, which was big in those days because you got to play at the proms. That's where the money was.
Sure.
And then I got to bring it up to date. The latest band that I've been in was called the Winettes.
The Winettes. I like it.
There's a picture, Jeffrey, in the book on that 50-page insert with Michael Skurnick. Who was our lead guitar player. If you don't know Michael.
Oh, yeah, Skurnick Wines. Yeah,
sure.
Skurnick Wines, Michael Skurnick. Joey DeLisio was our best musician in a way because he played 5 different instruments. He ran the River Cafe. He ran the River Cafe wine program for 40 years. He retired. And let's see who else. Josh Wesson is a famous wine and food guy. And we even had Brian Miller at the time, who was the restaurant critic for the New York Times, play with us as well.
Wow.
And we played all over the country.
Wow, that's amazing.
Weren't that bad. But are you a musician, Jonathan?
Well, I am. I think, I would consider myself. I play the drums.
Okay.
As I did in my youth, and I too had a band.
Yes, Dad. What was the name of your band?
The Pleasure Seekers.
Whoa.
That was
hard to live with, Jonathan. I'm so sorry to hear this,
Yeah.
The name of Dad's band in high school was the
wait a second. That was my high school band.
Yeah.
I helped create. I was one of 2 founders of that band.
Oh my gosh.
But most importantly, I took drum lessons, for many years. But I took them from a fellow here in New Jersey, locally, Maplewood, New Jersey. And I was this was in middle school and high school, and I was going to school with a classmate of mine who was also a drummer, and his lessons occurred just before my lessons. Same drum teacher. We went to a drum school to do this, and I wasn't doing too well during those lessons. I was okay, but I wasn't a great drummer. But my friend was apparently quite good, because my teacher would say every time we had this lesson, and my friend walked out, he would say, "Your friend Maxie, he is just absolutely unbelievable." It was Max Weinberg who was the drummer taking lessons.
Amazing. I love that story. We tried to get Max Weinberg on the show, but I could not reach him.
Well, maybe we can get Bruce Springsteen instead.
Maybe we could get Bruce instead of Max. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I also am a drummer, and so when you come to visit, the drums are set up. I have a music studio.
Oh, cool! Oh, that would be.
Finally, I got my Fender amps, and I'm taking vocal lessons now, because all of my bands, from the time I was in, high school or whatever, I would sing, I would belt it out, unbelievable. But all of the band members turned my microphone off, always off. I was singing, so I've decided I'm going to come get back to them. So speaking of that, so I live, Woodstock, the town, the village of Woodstock, the hamlet of Woodstock, where Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Bob Dylan, they all recorded here in Bearsville studio. Mm-hmm. And there was something when I was like in my early 20s, it was drum lessons available. And so in Woodstock, so I got it called up, and knocked on the door, and I say, "I'm Kevin Zraly. I'm here for my drum lesson." And the guy says, "Yeah, I'm Jack DeJeanette, and come on in." So if you don't know Jack DeJeanette, look up Miles Davis's drummer, who just turned, I think he just turned 80. So wow. You never know what's going to happen. Yep. I wasn't a good drummer either. That's why I stayed with the guitar. But the thing is, I could go into so many stories, but I played the drums with the Wynettes. My primary was guitar, but Joey DeLisio was so good. He played flute, he played piano, he played harmonica. And when you're playing those 1, 4, 5 progressions, you need a harmonica in there. Easy beat on the drum. I was the Charlie Watts. The drum.
Yeah, I like it, Charlie Watts.
Just keep it going.
Keep the beat. Yeah.
And he always looked good. Did you ever see Charlie Watts on the drum?
Oh yeah.
Oh, always. No, but he's dressed. He was the best drummer ever.
Tie jacket, right?
Oh, yeah. He was the man.
Yeah. Amazing.
Go all get together and play. And you'd be surprised how many people in the wine and food industry and winery
are involved.
And created their own band.
Music. Yeah,
in music.
Well, we need to go to your house and have some wine and play some music, preferably in that order.
Okay. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, wine and then music.
Eat too. We'll eat a little.
We'll eat. Yeah, sure. Let's eat. Why not? Right. And this has been a great conversation. And, I wish we could speak longer, but to be able to see you and speak with you and learn about all of this has been an amazing experience.
I got one last thing before you send me off to the pasture here right now.
Yeah.
This was a spectacular class.
Wow.
Kevin is showing a diploma-looking thing, beverage program. What is that?
Well, it was called the Grossman Beverage Program.
Oh, Harriet Lembeck. Yeah.
It was before Harriet Lembeck. It was
Grossman. Harold Grossman.
Harold Grossman.
Yeah.
By the way, why did I bring this up? The date of my graduation was 1972. So we're at my 50th year of the only class I ever took. And it was at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel.
Yes.
I was in heaven, okay? I was 21 years old. I would go down dressed up, and there was like 100 people in the class, and we'd try all these wines. But it was fantastic. I wish it could exist today, because to everybody, even in bartending-wise as well. I went there really to learn more about bartending. But 10 weeks of wine, 4 weeks of distilled spirits and bartending, and one session on beer. And that doesn't exist anymore.
No,
it was a great intensive class, yeah.
So I just want to celebrate my 50th.
Yes, congratulations on your 50th. And
I'll drink to that.
We'll drink to that. Kevin Zraly, thank you so much for joining us on the Cocktail Guru podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Kevin. This is a dream come true for me. Thank you very much for being here. Tipple Time is brought to you in part by Perfect Purée of Napa Valley and Maison Ferrand.
Here for another Tipple Time, Jonathan, at your service. Today we will make a simple highball style drink I call the Storm Chaser, and it has Plantation O.F.T.D, which is their overproof rum. It's 69% alcohol by volume, and this is really delicious. Actually, the Cellar master, whom I know very well, Alexandre Gabriel, scoured these rum joints to figure out exactly how best to blend together Caribbean rums, along with some of my dear friends highlighting the flavors, actually highlighting the industry itself with these wonderful friends of mine, Jeff Berry, for instance, Martin Cate, Paul McGee, Dave Wondrich, and of course, Cellar master Alexandre Gabriel, all together to make this fine rum. So what I'll do is start with my tall highball glass, or Collins glass, as you may want to call it, and I'm doing 1.5 ounces of the Plantation O.F.T.D rum. There we go. We're jiggering, of course, we're measuring, making sure everything is nice and precise. I have the Perfect Purée of Napa Valley, their pear puree, which works really well, not only seasonally, but year-round. I love pear in pretty much all types of cocktails, and this works really well with these flavors. And as you've probably heard me mention, if you're in the hospitality industry, you could get free samples of Perfect Purée of Napa Valley. We're throwing the link down here, and you can just follow that link. And adding a little bit of lime juice to balance things out, and just a touch of simple syrup. So I did a 1/2 ounce lime juice, 1/4 ounce of simple syrup. And you know, the Perfect Purée of Napa Valley is great, especially in these times when you might be short-staffed at your bar or restaurant, and you may not have the time to make fresh fruit purees. Go ahead and buy these from your local food distributor or online. Comes frozen. It's really, really lovely. And then you just thaw it out and use it as you need. So we're adding ice into this Collins glass, and you see for those of you who are watching, you can see my fancy ice scooper, which is in fact not an ice scooper, but works really well. This is a nice little tip, a hack. This is a julep strainer, which I'm using as my ice scoop right now. And to top it off, kind of a dark and stormy variation, which is why I have my ginger beer. And there we go, just filling it up to the top. I have my spoon, and I am stirring it. Oh yeah. Beautiful, delicious. We'll add a straw, just like that. And do we have a garnish? I'm actually looking around for things, and I don't see my garnish, but that's okay, because I've got the lime that I was going to cut and add as a garnish. Hilarious, right? Oh, here we go. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of, we're gonna add a touch of cinnamon sugar on top, just to give it a little bit of a fun flair. There we go. Okay. That's fine. I went off camera, folks, just in case you were wondering. And we'll give it a little straw taste. Oh, delicious. You know, it's not too sweet because of that rum. Great full body flavor. The pear works perfectly. That ginger flavor, it's just really nice and delicious. Cheers again to Tipple Time.
Tipple Time is brought to you in part by Maison Ferrand and Perfect Purée of Napa Valley.
That does it for today's show. If you enjoy what we do, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also support the show with a small monthly donation to help sustain future episodes. Just click on the donate button at the top of our website and choose your donation amount. To learn more about future guests, visit www.thecocktailgurupodcast.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok.
The Cocktail Guru podcast is produced by First Reel Entertainment and distributed by EatsDrinksTV, a service of the Center for Culinary Culture, home of the Cocktail Collection, and is available via Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.